hello, welcome back to Out on That Line podcast. Grandfather always said, this is episode 49, and now I know the reason why. I'm Geoff with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
I'm salty, Geoff. I'm salty as hell, and it's all your fault. Because I saw your fucking Instagram story, you and fiance of the pod, Marla, going to this fucking totally balls-to-the-wall donut place. We ain't got nothing around here like that. The best we can do is Dunkin' fucking Donuts, and I know we could do better, but we choose not to. So I guess tell me what the best one was and how good was it?
The horchata donut was out of this world, my friend. Man, all of them were great. But hot damn, that horchata donut was unbelievable.
Was it frosted, filled, or both?
Frosted.
Okay.
Not filled.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
it was a lot of frosting. There was like a ton of like whipped cream on it. And for those folks who haven't had horchata before, I suggest you try it. It's a drink. It's like a rice milk drink, and there's usually some like cinnamon, maybe some cardamom in there. It is delicious. Very like traditional Hispanic beverage. I'd never had it before I moved down to Texas and met fiance of the pod, Marla, but goddamn, I love that stuff. So when I saw that they had a horchata donut, I was like, yeah, let's get that. So she had won like this little contest thing they had on Instagram. They had put up like comment and, like the post and comment, follow us, whatever, like every other company does on Instagram, and you'll be entered in to win. And so today they were doing a giveaway. And so yesterday she found out she won the contest. So we got a free box of 6 donuts. And so we went in today to pick them up, and they were so good. So unbelievably good. The place is very, very Austin. Yeah, I think it started in Miami, but the inside is just as Austin as can be. Just like wood fixtures everywhere, like the most retro latte machine you've ever seen in your life, or espresso machine, I guess. And just racks and racks of donuts as big as your head. It was incredible to be in there. And then to eat the donuts, even better.
I got to tell you, I follow a lot of Insta Thoughts on my account. Every now and then I see them and I'm like, oh, you can look, but you can't touch. And when I saw your donuts, I audibly moaned to myself like a woman wearing vibrating panties. I was just like, they looked so fucking good. It was enraging.
Yeah, they are that good and more. Like, we will certainly be back. Yeah, they did the wrong thing by us by letting us win that contest and getting free donuts, because now we know how good they are. And those are not cheap donuts, my friend. This is not Dunkin' Donuts. You go down and get a dozen for like $8 or $9. They're like $4 or $5 a donut.
Jesus
but they're
Christ.
Huge donuts. Yeah,
that's
but they're
Austin,
huge
Texas
donuts
right there.
Yeah, that's as Austin as it gets. And it's right next to Magnolia Cafe. So it's like you can go wham bam in the mornings and get that hangover right out of you.
Damn, South Congress knows what's up.
Oh yeah. It is. I mean, it's pretty much like built up all the way up to there. I don't know if you remember when you lived down here that there wasn't, you had to get like pretty far down Congress towards downtown before you really got to like anything built up. It is basically from South Park Meadows all the way down to downtown now. Like the entirety of South Congress is just like apartment buildings, restaurants, stores, like shops, everything. There's this place called Music Lane, which is down in the real like South Congress area, which is the traditional one everybody's always thought of it as. And it's just this little walking outdoor mall type place, but there's like every high-end store you can think of. There's like a Nike store down there now. There's a store called Everlane where everything in there is like $300, even like a just basic shirt. I mean, it's just like a ton of stuff like that. Austin is not for the middle class anymore, I'll tell you that.
Wow. Yeah, we were living high on the hog back when it was you, me, and Rory.
Oh, yeah, and Fresh Donuts just down the street.
Oh, Spider Hole Donuts. The name changed every week.
I haven't gone over there very much because we have another donut place just down the street from us. Not the salty donut, what we were talking about, but it's called Morning Donut. And it's another place just like Fresh Donuts. I mean, it's a blueprint. They must have like just a checklist of just like, you got to have kolaches, you got to have pre-made breakfast sandwiches, you got to have a cooler full of different kinds of milk, a little basic coffee station. You can't get a latte there. No. It's just drip coffee. That's it. You like it. You take it and like it, or you just don't get anything at all, and it's just, it's perfect.
Well, speaking of sweet treats, Geoff, what do we got this week?
We have, and this should be no surprise to consistent listeners of this podcast, but Sturgill Simpson has released the Ballad of Dude and Juanita. And we are going to be talking about that album this week. And oh, what an album it is. And we'll get into it a little more later, but it is a concept album. So I want to kind of pose a discussion here for a little bit before we dive into the Sturgill of kind of what makes a great concept album. So Alex, to you, what makes a great concept album?
Well, first things first, as soon as you said we were going to talk about this, my mind went blank. I was like, I don't know any concept albums. Anxiety, pinged, spiked. I'm like, oh, fuck.
You're welcome.
I would have been less anxious if I had forgotten to listen to the album this week. But then, of course, we'll bring him up early. Uncle Frank Zappa, has a concept album called Joe's Garage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, if you go back to something like Fountains of Wayne, Welcome Interstate Managers, that was a concept album that was like slice of life Americana. We're going to talk about different people from different demographics and different walks of life and different ages and different parts of the country. And that's great. But to me, a concept album is more cohesive and says more to me when it follows one character, one theme, one story. And that's Joe's Garage. It's totally fucking weird. Are you familiar at all?
Yes. Actually, we used to play, Reno and I, in Hair of the Dog, used to play Joe's Garage.
See, and I asked him about that. I was like, you guys used to play Joe's Garage? And Reno just deadpan as always goes, we played something we called Joe's Garage. I'm not sure it bore any resemblance to the song.
He's probably right.
I was like, okay, well, makes sense. But it's basically like Frank Zappa's big thing, obviously, was censorship, music, creativity, and anti-establishment. And that's Joe's Garage. And he tries to say a lot with it. He tries to cover a lot of ground. The sexual revolution, technology, repressive state apparatus, like all these different things. To mixed results, honestly, as much as I love him. It's super fucking long. It's super self-indulgent. But what makes it so great to me is that it's all crystallized for me in that one of those last songs, Watermelon and Easter Hay, which is an 11.5-minute song that's basically the protagonist has been stripped of everything in his life, women, music, his entire identity. So he decides he's going to write a guitar solo in his head. And it just starts off with this like distant whine, and it grows into this whole entire piece with bells and everything like that. And that song to me is where it stuck the landing. I'm like, this whole thing is about how important music is. So long story short, with a concept album, it's proving why that concept matters to you and why I should care about it.
Yes. I think that boils it down perfectly as to what makes a good album, a good concept album, is it needs to have a consistent, coherent theme, whether it's a single person, like a point of view storyline, or like Fountains of Wayne did with Welcome Interstate Messengers, where it's just kind of this, each song is a different slice of life. It's got to have something that holds it all together. Otherwise it will absolutely fall apart. And I think for me, like an album like A Night at the Opera by Queen is the kind of the perfect example of that, or Tommy by The Who. I used to listen to that album all the time growing up and probably there's a lot of themes in Tommy that 10 or 11-year-old me in the basement just digging through my dad's vinyl records probably shouldn't have been kind of aware of at that point. Because that, The Who had come out, and Bob O'Reilly is what people know them for, My Generation, but then you hear something like Tommy and you're like, oh, they've got something else in the bag here. They've got some bigger ideas. That was much more akin to like Dire Straits or a different band like that, where it's like, this doesn't sound like The Who necessarily, but you can tell what kind of creative energy they had by listening to that album. And I thought, again, a very coherent, cohesive album, and one of those point of view kind of albums where it has the main focus character. There's a lot more going on with that than I think there is with Joe's Garage. I think they kind of widen it out to include a lot more things. But to me, I think of our generation so far, the best one we've had is Welcome to the Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. And a lot of folks kind of like wrote off My Chemical Romance back in the day. They were like, oh, they're just an emo band, but I think with the benefit of hindsight, people have realized of that generation of bands, they were one of the best as far as being able to write a big catchy hook, being able to kind of have that theme. And then, because you hear Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, their big breakthrough album, and it's all very angsty. It's all very emo, but with a real great edge to it. And it all sounds like it's going to go off the rails. You don't expect them to be the level of arena rock band that they became with Welcome to the Black Parade. I think not only was that a great album, it really, kind of propelled them to another level in music history. And I hope it gets remembered, for what it is, was a great album. Now, I say Welcome to the Black Parade is probably the defining concept album of our generation. I really feel like it should be in Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3 by Coheed and Cambria, but that's a story for another day. You can go back and listen to the episode that Tanner and I did about Coheed and Cambria's and Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, but not the most popular album, so I just don't think it can hold a candle to like a Joe's Garage or Welcome to the Black Parade or a Tommy. And up to this point, Welcome to the Black Parade was it for me. But now I think the Ballad of Dude and Juanita has taken that mantle for me. And, you want to talk about album of the year contenders, like this one has leapt over Olivia Rodrigo's Sour for me to be album of the year contender number 1 so far.
Wow. I can't agree with that, because it occupies, and that's me, but it occupies a very different space for me. You talk about something that's like very of its moment and of a certain generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think Sour is so powerful. It's a thoughtful Gen Z album that I think could open a lot of eyes to people who otherwise write off the kids as a bunch of TikTokers who don't care about anything. It's like, no, they feel emotion in stereo to a Wagnerian intensity, and that's what Olivia Rodrigo was able to do. As far as the Ballad of Dude and Juanita, what I love about it is that it's the exact opposite. It is hearkening back to a time, the 1800s, the frontier, and we've had so much material since we started this show. We started it in quarantine.
Yep.
So a lot of the stuff we've encountered since then has been quarantine themed, and your mileage may vary. You talk about a concept album. BB Rexa, Better Things. I don't think she ever defined it as such, but it was conceptual. It was about her journey with mental health, and take nothing away from her, but it wasn't concretely a concept, which is why it stumbled a little bit for me. But something like the Ballad of Dude and Juanita isn't talking about the pandemic. It can't. It's not talking about any kind of modern day sensibilities or modern day strife. It is such a perfect vacation. So it is 100%. It's short, it's sweet, it's potent. It's one of my top albums. I can't say it leapfrogged Sour. Sour is still in the lead for me, but it's 100% up there because it was a vacation.
That's fair. And I think people need to go and read. There was a Rolling Stone article by a writer named Marissa Moss, who is really an excellent music journalist, and, throw her a follow on Twitter. She does a really, really great job at kind of just really trying to elevate these artists like Sturgill. A lot of the female artists in country music, she really takes a big part in really trying to make sure that people are aware of the creativity and kind of what's coming out of that side of country music right now. And, she does touch on like the bro country and the real like pop country stuff a little bit. 'Cause if you're a music journalist, you have to, you got to get those clicks somewhere, but she spends most of her time, and you can tell where her passion is talking about these artists that are, it's creativity for creativity's sake. It's trying to come up with something different than what has been done before. And she ends the article, and it's really immersive. I mean, it gets into Sturgill as a person more than it talks about this album specifically. Kind of talks about the germination of this album, where it came from, its inspiration. Sturgill Simpson's grandparents were extremely important to him in his life. You know, he's from an area of the country where, you know, a small town kind of life, you know, where it's like your family is a huge part of your life. You know, if you're from bigger cities and things like that, you get involved in a lot of other stuff. Maybe those sort of relationships fall by the wayside. In his area, you know, in the Appalachia area, you know, there's really not a ton of people around. So you form these relationships with folks, and his grandparents were that relationship. On his Metamodern Sounds and Country Music album, it starts out with his grandfather introducing the album when he says, "And now Metamodern Sounds and Country Music." Like, that's his grandfather's voice. You know, so they've always been supportive of him. You know, he's always tried to reach out to them and stay in touch with them. And, you know, this album, I think, came to be because he wanted to kind of pay tribute to them in his own way, with not talking about their life specifically, because this didn't happen to them, you know, this whole storyline. But I think he was able to inject their personalities, and he's like, if they were in this situation, how would they act? And I think that was kind of the culmination of a lot of years of having spent with them, the pain of losing his grandfather and wanting to pay tribute to that. And he actually was able to play the album for his grandmother. And, you know, it's just kind of a really cool full circle thing for Sturgill, I think, because also in that article, he says this is probably his last solo album, at least for the time being. He had in his mind kind of a 5-album cycle, which he has now completed with High Top Mountain, Metamodern Sounds and Country Music, Sailor's Guide to Earth, Sound and Fury, and now this, The Ballad of Dude Juanita. He also did the Cut and Grass album, but that's not really part of that 5-album cycle. It was just something he wanted to do. But he wants to go and start a band, like a real band again. Like it was what was it, Sunday River or something? I can't remember what his Sunday Valley, something like that. Before he was a solo artist, he was part of this kind of ripping country band. And I think he wants to go back to that because he said he can be even more vulnerable as part of a band, because he'll have that protection of the collective. So he'll be able to kind of express himself even more. And if he expresses himself already as deeply as he does in much of his music, I can't imagine what else he's got in the bank. You know, I'm really looking forward to seeing what else he does. I'm less disappointed by him saying this is his last solo album than I am excited, because every change he's made so far, I think, has made him a better artist, has made him a more interesting artist. So he gets full credit and I think full leeway to do whatever the hell he wants from here on, because so far he hasn't missed.
No, and I think it scared a lot of people when he went from Sailor's Guide to Earth to Sound and Fury, because it was such a drastic reinvention. Sound and Fury is not country.
No,
at all.
Not a bit.
Not a drop of it in its fucking DNA. And a lot of people were kind of knocked off their axis when that came out. But I like what you and I were talking about before the show, where it's like he wants to get into acting. He's in that Scorsese movie you told me about. He's just an artist. And I think that is the best thing that you can bring to all of your endeavors, is if you are a jack of all trades. Because I hate to keep punching on BB Rexa, but very clearly a pop star, very clearly boxed in, very clearly limited by her popularity, has more to lose if she branches out, because she's way more in the mainstream eye. So she's getting into acting. That's great. I hope it goes well for her. But that almost feels like a managerial move. Like, baby, we got to get you in movies. It's the next step for you. Whereas Sturgill Simpson is like, well, I might like to try me some of that acting. And he's learning from every other thing that he does, and bringing different disciplines to everything else. So if he learns something about playing the guitar, what part of that can he bring into his acting? If he learns something on set, what can he bring into producing another artist? If the guy wanted to pull a Captain Beefheart and start fucking painting, I'm sure he'd rock at it. It's just like creative people are capable of so much if you just stay the fuck out of their way. And then you get Sturgill Simpson coming up with an album like this, which, like we always say, is not reinventing the wheel. There is nothing new or novel from a sound perspective about this. It's reaching back to antiquity in music,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels so refreshing. It's totally fucking wild. Simultaneously it's a throwback and also something we haven't heard in a good long time that feels new.
Yeah. And there's so many like little breaks on the album where it's I don't know if you ever watched like Gunsmoke or like in Big Lebowski when they're singing the Rawhide theme song. You know, it's just like that kind of like chorus sort of country sound, you know, and he does that throughout the album to help advance the narrative through the album. It's really pretty incredible because that's exactly what they did in those old Western and cowboy movies. Was there'd be the montage, but it was they were singing to tell the story as they were going through the montage because they didn't have like the technology yet in film to be able to just like do those cuts and make it look correct and real. They'd have them, you know, big wide shot of them riding across the plains, and they'd have these songs with these lyrics being like, oh, and he's riding across the plains to go on to the next town. He's going to see what he can find, and like all that kind of stuff. And like they do that throughout this album. It's like a Western movie in album form. It's such a cool idea. And I don't know, I think like Willie Nelson did it with like Redheaded Stranger, and that was part of Sturgill's inspiration for this as well, was he listened to that album and he was like, well, I think I'd like to try to do something like that, you know, and Willie Nelson's got a solo on this album as well. So it's like Sturgill has every single bona fide that you can ever ask for out of a country music artist. You know, he's done like A Sailor's Guide to Earth is a country album, sort of. I mean, his only real true country albums have been High Top Mountain and this one, the Ballad of Dude and Juanita. Every other one has some country songs, but you couldn't really overall call them a country album. You know, there's always the country sensibility when it comes to storytelling and kind of remembering the past and how it affects your future, you know, and all those sort of themes that are consistent in country music. But it's like, this is him kind of closing that cycle in such a cool way, because High Top Mountain was very aggressive country music. You know, there was a lot of him being, it was like a rock and roll record, but in country music. You know, it was kind of a really cool thing that he did. Not the same way that like Blackberry Smoke does it, where they're like Southern rock. It was, you know, one of his lyrics was, they call me King Turd up here on Shit Mountain. If you want, you can have the crown. It was like all lyrics like that, talking about pills and robbing a bank because he can't afford to pay the bills. You know, it's like all these things that are these very modern, kind of what you might consider like white trash sensibilities, like a very aggressive record. And then he goes back to country finally with the Ballad of Dude and Juanita, but in such a different way. I think it just shows how varied his skill set is. But with each album, he got better, you know, and with each album, it feels like he learned something else and helped us learn something new about him as well. You know, he being vulnerable in song has never been an issue for him. You know, him opening up like he did in that Rolling Stone article was a treat, because there's not a lot of areas where you can really find out who he is as a person. And he really kind of opened up to that writer, because I think he understood what her intentions are, is just to like get to know him a little better. But it really was interesting listening to this album, because it felt like watching old Westerns with my dad. You know, that's why I loved it so much, because it had that nostalgia factor for me, where I used to sit and watch like Hogan's Heroes and Gunsmoke and all these like old style TV shows. And it was a really, really interesting thing that he did. And it shows how much he had respect for those things as well, with how well this album was done in using those items.
And you're right, it's cinematic. I closed my eyes and immediately could see all of this. You can see it as like Sturgill Simpson back in days of yore, sitting around a campfire telling us this story. Did he live it? Is he dude, or is he just a winsome old cowboy telling us the story? You could see it from that perspective, or you could see it very literally just watching all of these events play out. It's right in front of your eyes because of what he's able to evoke with the music. It's fucking nuts. So it is a movie, and I have seen nothing about this, but it would be pretty dope if they released it, because they released a visual companion with Sound and Fury. It'd be cool if they did that with Dude and Juanita, but the production on that, especially with the Delta variant going nuts, probably ain't feasible. But it would be really cool if they did. And it reminded me of a movie, a very shitty movie called Barbarossa, coincidentally starring Willie Nelson and Gary Busey.
Oh, God.
And it's a big-time piece of shit. But what that movie should have been was the Ballad of Dude and Juanita. They share a lot of the same DNA, and I see all the like lost potential of that shitty movie realized in this album. And it does make me sad that there's going to be no visual companion. You don't need it, but it was just so good that I was like, fuck, I kind of want to watch this now. Like I would watch this movie. Even if it's just
Sturgill on a horse for 30 minutes. Like that'd be great. That'd be fine.
Well, and they made the Coen brothers made that shitty Ballad of Buster Scruggs anthology thing. And I'm like, okay, so the Coen brothers, you're just silly guys now. This is what you do. You fucking blow each other and you come up with this. Come the fuck on. And everyone's like, well, it's the Coen brothers. It has to be good. It's like, no, it fucking sucks. It's incomprehensible. And I'm not too stupid to get it. It's just not saying anything worthwhile or interesting. But again, total reverse. Ballad of Dude and Juanita.
Man, some ricochet shots for Coen brothers here.
Brett, fuck you guys. You stop trying, and that pisses me off. And that's a great point about Sturgill. He never stops trying. He never phones it in. Maximum effort or nothing at all.
Yeah, and you can absolutely tell throughout this whole album. So I think without further ado, the way I think it's best to bring in this album is I'm just going to read the prologue. So the way this starts, and imagine, folks out there, that I'm singing this in the way of one of those old Western kind of theme songs, because that's kind of the way that this went. Come hear a tale out of the trails of old Kentucky hills. Hear a story from the year they started hiding stills. Back in pioneering days of 1862, about a maiden named Juanita and a man called Dude. Story of its time when time was tough on a man, when all he had to get by was a blade and powder can. Oh, Dude was an eagle and Juanita was his dove. He was a mighty mountain man. She was his one true love. And that is how we start this album. And then we go into Old Dude Part 1. And it is just like you're reading. I don't know if you ever read Daniel Boone back in the day, or like anything about Davy Crockett or anything like that. But it's just ripping those stories straight from my childhood and putting them into song here. It's really, really incredible. The first verse is talking about how Dude was born in Hardburley back in June of 29. Must have got that Martin Malin muzzle day he was born. Things he could do with that rifle: blow the balls off a bat and then a gunshot sound, reload and shoot it one more time. I mean, just like everything that you would want out of a Western, you're already getting right off the bat here. It really is incredible stuff how you are immediately immersed into this world. Maybe 2.5 minutes into the whole thing.
Yeah. And I'm a big time sucker for like homespun colloquialisms, like blow the balls off a bat. I love like slicker than cum on a gold tooth, shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds, like those like horribly crass but totally evocative little nuggets from a specific region and a specific time. So immediately it's setting up the flavor of this whole album. And like you said, it's like a tall tale. Like, what's that song? So-and-so combed his hair with a wagon wheel, had a toothache in his heel, that whole thing. Like, yeah. Or like John Henry versus the steam engine. Like, and it's not quite so grandiose, but it definitely sets him up as like a man's man who from a young age showed that he was fucking tougher than a $2 steak. And it gets you on his side. You like him. It's not this kind of, not to shit on this kind of thing, but weepy introspective stuff that we kind of get from someone like Chris Stapleton. I would argue a little too much. I really like Chris Stapleton, but a lot of the times the music crosses over into like solipsism, where it's just like a lot of him just musing about how sad he is. And this is Sturgill Simpson not hiding behind a character, but letting a character do the talking, which is what it needed to be. Don't show the hand of the writer. Don't inject yourself into it. Build up a legend and let him move the story. Yeah.
I mean, just this first song, I mean, wore a size 17 ring, had hands like a bear, and if he got him on you, he's taking that top hair. His grandfather taught him how to hunt, how to live off the land, taught him how to take a scalp when you kill a man. Because he was, he's the son of a Shawnee maiden and a mountain mining man is what they bill him as. So he always gets mad when people call him half breed. And so he's got a tomahawk, and that flintlock is all he needs. It's just such a cool song to introduce him, and also to introduce Shamrock and Sam, his mule and his dog, and talks about Juanita and talks about his 2 kids. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know if anybody has really ever done a storyline like this better than Sturgill did. And to take a Western and make it into an album, it really is incredible stuff.
And it's really subtle too. Like it doesn't, again, go way over the top. Stuff like verse 2, left the varnish off his words, feared no beast nor man. Didn't want to end up in his debt because it damn sure get paid. He was harder than the nails hammered Jesus' hands. And then you get that tang, that anvil sound.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that this album does all throughout that is so, so great. It's one of my favorite tricks that I talk about all the time, is when you can use the soundscapes to convey an emotion or to convey a visual. So like there are songs coming up, we'll get to Shamrock, where it's just the ability to use instruments to it's almost like radio play back in the day, like the Green Hornet. And, or Foley artists, where it's like you want to make the sound of a head splattering, so you drop a watermelon on the concrete. It's like he does that with nothing but instruments. The one wacky thing introduced is the anvil. This is very clearly an anvil hit. That's it. Everything else is banjos, guitars, fiddles. I mean, it's pretty fucking impressive.
Yeah, it never feels like you are taken out of the moment.
No.
It's just, you follow right along with the story. It moves at the speed that it should. It uses the points in the story that it should. It doesn't get too bogged down into details. It is constantly moving. Like every single song advances you through the story. There's no slog. It's only 27 minutes long, the whole album. So it's not as if it's a huge commitment to sit down and listen to it, but it feels so satisfying for such a short album. It feels like every single thing has its place. There's not a wasted moment on this entire album. I think that is a big reason why it's so strong, is because I think every single album that we've done, save for very few, has some really great songs, but then it has some that aren't so good. It's just like kind of feels like filler, and maybe the artist was really proud of them, but it just didn't come across the way it should. I feel like there was not a single moment, not one beat out of place on this album. It seemed like everything was just fit exactly the way it should. It's just like when you pack a suitcase and you get everything you need in there, and you don't even have to like push down on the top to get it zipped up. That's how I feel like he packed this album. Everything he needed was in there. Nothing that was unnecessary made it into this album. It was just a really excellent effort. And should we move on to the next song? One in the Saddle, One on the Ground.
Yeah, this is where the story really gets cooking.
Yes. Do you wanna lead us off on this one?
Yeah, sure. So, when I texted you earlier, I was like, yeah, I feel like the approach is kind of from the story standpoint, and then talking about the musical aspects after. So we're basically, it sets up who Dude and Juanita are, these people that fell in love and started a family, and then pretty immediately we find them in their happy home, and a bandit shows up and shoots Dude because he doesn't have his rifle on him, and absconds with Juanita. So Dude's lying in the field, and when he comes to, bandit's gone, Juanita's nowhere to be found, and this love that they have is so powerful. Like, you talk about Sturgill's grandparents and how he like based this on their essence and their love for one another, their union, right? So I think about it in those terms. I'm like, well, what would it be like if my grandparents, my dad's parents, what would it be like if they were in this song? This would be a 4-minute album, because grandma would have been abducted and grandpa would have went, the hell are you going to do? Plugged up his fucking wound with tobacco and moved on with his life. You can always find another one. I'll have sex with the mule if I have to. I don't give a shit. So it's very sweet. It's very powerful. And this was the moment, too, where all of the possibilities flashed before my eyes in this song. I was like, this could either end up like The Searchers. This could end up really fucking sad. This could end up with one or both of them dead. It could have a happy ending. I really don't know where it's going. But that was when I was like, oh shit, I'm invested. He got me invested in this song. And it's just that there's no pretending. You feel like he lived this. You really do.
Yep.
Like he lived in this world and could talk about it. Like this is a song that was handed down through the generations. The fact that he came up with this without ever having had this life experience is fucking nuts.
Yeah. And I think one thing that he does so well is we really only have like 6 characters. It's him, Juanita, their kids who really don't get involved at all.
No.
There's Shamrock and Sam, and I guess 7 in the Bandit. It's like, so I guess there's 7 characters. Or McClure, I guess, would make 8. But it's like there's so few people in this storyline. There's so few characters here that each one of them gets introduced and you get some backstory with every single one of them. So when you're talking about becoming invested, that's why you become invested, is because you understand why Dude and Juanita love each other, because she gave him 2 kids. And then it introduces, and then each thing, it just makes sense how they get introduced. Nothing is just kind of shoehorned in there. It talks about, he lives off the land. So he obviously needs a mule to help plow the land. So he's got Shamrock. Then every man needs a dog. So we've got Sam the Hound, and it's just like everything makes sense. Every piece of this world fits together in the way that it should. And nothing is overly complicated. He doesn't go real deep in the weeds with anybody in like any past situations. It's just, you get a little backstory about what kind of people they are. And then from here on, it's story time. Let's go. And so Bandit shows up, shoots Dude, takes Juanita. Dude says to his kids, take care of one another. I'll come back, come hell or high water, with your mom safe and sound. It's just like with a bullet hole in him. Like that's how much he loves this woman, is he's riding after her with a bullet hole. So he takes his mule and he takes his dog, one in the saddle, one on the ground. And like, that's just how he builds the story. And it is truly just unbelievable. Every time you hear it, it just seems to get better, because it's like a warm hug. Once you know how it goes, it's like a warm hug hearing the whole thing play out again.
An epic journey in 27 fucking minutes, man. It's wild. And, while we're on the subject, talk about Taylor Swift, I never miss an opportunity to dunk on her, even though that makes me a sexist, apparently. But legitimate criticism, like that song from whatever that fucking stupid album was we reviewed, where she's talking about like the guy at the ice cream store with the teal sweater. It's like, what's the point? What was the allure? Mm-hmm. With Dude and Juanita, you see it and you feel it. And Sturgill Simpson makes it very clear. They were in love. They made a life together. And you understand both of them when you get to the point at the end of the song where it's like, I'm going to go find her and I will bring her back. He didn't wait for a second. The time it took to go, oh, it looks like the bullet went through. I'm going to let the dog lick the wound clean. I'm going to throw a bunch of shit on the mule's pack, and then I'm out of here. Peace. I'm going to go find the love of my life. Mm-hmm. Taylor Swift songs, like, how can you get invested? He's the cute boy at the froyo shop. Who gives a flying fuck? If he donated plasma to your beloved cat, that's one thing. But, artists, I think, sometimes are afraid to flesh out characters because they don't trust their audience. They're like, oh, it's got to be a vibe. And it's okay to have songs that are a vibe, for sure. That Leah Kate song that I did on singles a long time ago, Boyfriend, that is a completely insubstantial fucking frosted rice cake of a song. But it's really fun. Songs are allowed to function like that, but you cannot subsist on a diet of that entirely, because at a certain point it becomes clear you don't trust us to handle heavier themes and to go with you when you try to stretch. So I appreciate that this is an example of Sturgill does not hold back from his audience.
Yeah, and it's just such a good introduction, because the next song we get, called Shamrock, is we've been introduced to Shamrock, the finest, the biggest mule, and now we get a little more backstory on Shamrock. Never was a finer breed than the steed that was Shamrock, plain to see by his conformation that he came from finest stock. Said he stood about 19 hands, didn't need no kick to go. old dude up top, deep in the saddle, hollering, whoa, 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 whoa. Just like paints that picture of this massive mule and dude on the saddle riding along to get his woman back. And it's just such a great, like, you get the, not only have you developed a relationship with dude and with Juanita, now you're developing a relationship with Shamrock as you see the relationship between Shamrock and dude develop as well. And even though it's a horse, like, there's not a lot going on that farm. Like, there's very few things around. So you create bonds with things. So Sam and Shamrock, the hound and his mule, are two of the most important things in his life next to his actual family. And so you really get the sense that all of these things dude loves so much. And it almost seems like Shamrock and Sam are just as happy to be a part of getting Juanita back as dude is. They're like, I'm going to go help dude get this woman back because we love her too. And it's like, obviously the horse doesn't talk, but like, that's the sense you get, is they have this inextricable bond with each other, that, man and beast going to work together to accomplish the goal. And it's a story you've heard a million times in a bunch of different ways, but it never really gets old when it's told well. And it is told so well here.
Yeah, I mean, not to reduce it down to its barest essence, but the donkey gets a fucking song and it doesn't suck. It's as much, Shamrock is as much of a legend as dude. And again, the wordplay, amazing. Only ever had one rider. Anyone else was getting bucked. Cross any kind of land through the rain and the snow and the muck. Sure-footed as a billy goat with 33-inch ears. Clog dance on a snake with his front 2 feet and give coyotes the rear. Kick so hard it sent them up and out of the stratosphere. Make a coyote fly so far it wouldn't land until next year. And it's like, I love to picture that. The narrator is never even implied to be dude, but I almost love to think of it like this is coming from dude's writings or like the things dude has said. Like, I could see him as an old man with his grandkids on his knees being like, let me tell you about Shamrock, daddy's old mule. Like, you just see it so clearly when you're so proud of something. Everyone's dog is the best dog ever. Everyone's cat is the cutest cat ever. Everyone's kid is the smartest kid ever. And this is no exception. It's bragging on the mule, who is an integral part of this rescue effort. And we see that as it goes on, and we see that definitely as it goes on for Sam. And I just love that, like, no character was too small to really give some shine to in this album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's an animal. You know what I mean? You've heard a million songs about people's dogs. Like Chris Stapleton had the song about his dog on Starting Over. There's another song on this album about Sam, the dog, and it's just like, you've heard a lot of those songs and a lot of them are great, but I feel like very few of them have ever made you really feel a connection. You felt the sadness or the connection through the artist, but never have I felt connected to the actual animal like I did with Shamrock and Sam on this album. It's like the mule is just as tough as the guy riding it. You've got all this sense of how tough dude is with his big hands like a bear, wears a size 17 ring. Now you've got this mule with 33-inch ears, can kick a coyote so high it won't land until next week. It's like you get this sense, these like bigger than life things about these people and how they're willing to go to the ends of the earth to get back the thing that they love, and it's just such a cool idea to treat the mule as an actual character instead of just something that dude rode along. Like, you get to understand the connection that they had together and why it mattered that he was going on Shamrock the mule to get back Juanita. They weren't less of a part of the family because they were animals. They were all one and the same, and it was time to go get one of the family members back. And so they all were glad to participate. And it's like, it really kind of humanizes those characters the way that he did it.
Well, and there's kind of an innate loyalty to these animals that we experience in real life. I mean, our dogs are loyal to us. Animals that are capable of bonding with a human bond and bond hard. And if we're going to the next song, Played Out, that's really where we see this kind of coming home to roost. So to skip to the end of the song, we'll double back to like more of what it's about. But at this point, The journey's become so hard. They've been out for 5 days in the elements. Dude's got a fucking bullet hole in him. And they've been trying to follow the trail of Juanita and the bandit, and the trail's gone cold, but we're going to press ahead anyway. Shit's looking pretty dire. And he hasn't heard from Sam. He can't see Sam, hasn't heard him barking anymore. Like we said, the trail's gone cold. And that's when the worst happens, and we see that Sam wasn't just a dog. Sam could have been a line in the first song. Well, he headed out with his mule and his dog. They don't get names. They just head out with him, and they're totally they're as incidental as the gun, and just is what it is. But this song is about a fucking dog giving his all, sacrificing his life, because I don't even want to say his owner, his best friend, wants to get his wife back, and he's not going to be the little dog that let him down. It's fucking painful. By the end of this song and into the one after it, I was a fucking wreck, man. Like, this is where Sturgill Simpson being so evocative comes back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah. I was definitely crying during this one. I mean, it's good luck listening to this album after having been introduced to Shamrock the way that you were and understanding the bond that dude has with his animals. And you get to hear he hadn't heard Sam, and after 5 days and nights following the sound, Sam done went silent, is nowhere to be found. Oh wait, I see him lying there on the ground. Always played out, thorns stuck in blood raw, torn plumb all to pieces, done worn off his paw. Then old Sam let out his last dying bay call, so I dug him a grave, covered it all. And it's just like such a matter of fact thing that's like, this dog just gave his all. And, earlier in the song, he said, Lord, don't let this journey be in vain. And I think this is kind of the motivation that he's like, well, my dog died for this. Like, I'm going to get this woman back. Like, I can't, bullet hole in me be damned. Like, rain be damned. Like, trail gone cold be damned. Like, I am going to get this woman back no matter what happens. I'm going to do it or die trying. And he's like, because anything less would be an insult to Sam. And I think that kind of illustration of that bond and how sad he was. And even though time is of the essence here, the trail has gone cold, it's raining. He takes the time to give the dog a proper burial. Like the dog doesn't become inconsequential just because it's dead. And then the next song, just titled Sam, we kind of get the eulogy of the dog, which I think is where you think it's only the only real mention of the dog since, one in the saddle, one in the ground is played out. But then you get to realize that Sam gets his own song too, just like Shamrock did. And while it might be a posthumous song, it is a tribute nonetheless, and no less valid than Shamrock's was.
And it's very simple. And like we talked about, Shamrock's song was all about building up this legendary mule. And Sam, by contrast, the song Sam, is, like you said, a eulogy, and it doesn't need a lot of ornamentation. It's literally just saying, you were a good dog. You were a great companion. I love how you like to do dog things. You like to chew on a bone. You like to sleep on the porch. You like to tree raccoons. Like, you howled at the moon. You did all these wonderful dog things, and I didn't need anything more from you than exactly what you were. And it's just, I don't know what else you would muster up as you laid this great pet and great friend to rest. It didn't need to be more than this, and I think Sturgill knew that. It's just this really brief, somber moment where we break, and like you said, it raises the stakes for trying to get Juanita back.
And it's another one of those songs where they do that really kind of Western chorus, where it's like, it's not just Sturgill singing, but when they say the line, most of all, he was my best friend and he's gone too soon. It's like talking about all these things. He was the runt of the litter, but a plenty mean pup, put Sam on the scent and he never let up. Spent his nights on the porch chewing on a bare bone. Now he's underground and I'm all alone. It's like you get all this, like you get fired up, like, yeah, Sam was a great dog. And then it's like, but now he's gone and I'm all alone. It's just like you get built up and brought back down 3 times in this song, but it's like such a good tribute to him because it reminds you how much the dog meant to Dude, how much Sam meant to this family. And he's like, okay, well, in honor of Sam, I'm going to get Juanita back. And then we kind of get into the real, like we're starting to get towards the end of the song. And the next song, Juanita, like, see, everybody kind of gets their own song here. You know, it's a really interesting thing that he did, but it all advanced the story instead of just introductions and like what the Fountains of Wayne did with Welcome Interstate Messengers, where it's like each song is its own little story in itself. Like each character has their song, but it's all part of this story. The story moves right along as we're getting introduced to everybody and kind of what they mean to Dude and where they fit into this whole thing. So in Juanita, you know, this is where I think Sturgill does his best songwriting. You know, I think this is where he harkens back to like Sailor's Guide to Earth level songwriting. You know, Sound and Fury had some, when you could understand what he was saying, Sound and Fury had some really great songwriting as well. Cutting Grass, I think, was a great illustration because you could really hear him and his songwriting ability. And I think Juanita on this album, to me, is the best that Sturgill has to offer as a songwriter. Just kind of the metaphors that he uses, the way that he kind of, you know, and I think what the purpose of it is he's like, Juanita needs to be the most important part of this story. So she needs to have my strongest descriptions, my strongest songwriting, because she is the pivot point of the whole story. The whole thing is happening because she got taken away and now is trying to get found by Dude. So it's like her song needs to be the strongest, needs to be the one that tugs on your heartstrings the most and gets you most invested with her. And I think him understanding that is that less of a musician thing and just that general creative, like artist thing. You know, we're the greatest directors of all time, of the best movies you've ever seen, understand things. And Sturgill is trying to be on that level of understanding how a story should go together, where the focus needs to be. And I think with this song, he just does it perfectly.
Well, and there's such a temptation on songs like this too, and we've heard plenty of them, where it's all about Juanita's physical beauty or a Juanita type. And there's definitely some of that in the song, but it's like one thing, like, oh, you're purty, you have long black hair and blue eyes. That's as far into the looks as it gets, but there are plenty of other songs that, like, it's a guy trying to talk about how much he loves a woman, and I'm like, all you've done is talk about how she's so pretty and you're addicted to her looks. But this is important because Juanita was Dude's salvation. Much in the same way that someone who feels like they were rescued by God and they decided to give their life to Christ, this is the person that rescued you from being your worst self, taught you how to love, and loved you unconditionally in return. You'll do anything to preserve that, because what's the alternative? You turn back into the person you were, or worse. And you can tell those are the sentiments running through Dude's mind while he's just laying there. He just buried his best friend, and he's lying there in total pain, and he's got a fever and he's cold. But the thing that's keeping him going is I love Juanita more than anything, and she changed my entire life, and I will do anything to give her back her life and pay that debt forward. It's totally fucking powerful. Yeah,
it is a gorgeous song. It is beautifully written, and really, I think, hammers home the point that there is nothing that Dude is not going to do to get this woman back in his life. And then we move into Go in Peace, and this is where we really get cooking in the story. This is where we really find out what Dude is made of. You know, we've had all of this preamble, we've had all of these introductions of all these characters and all of these whys, as far as, you know, why Dude is doing what he's doing and how much this means to him. But now we get into the actual real, like, narrative part of the storyline, where we're going to find out what happens when he finds her. And I think from here, it's like an action movie. It's like any John Wayne film you ever watched. You know, it's like just every sort of kind of cliche Western thing that's ever happened in any of those shows or movies. It's like you almost know that it's coming. You know, it's like you know that it's going to happen, but it's so satisfying the whole way through. And it's just, so he like finds when he woke up, he saw the faces of the mighty Cherokee. So he's, it gets you in the sense of like these old Western movies where it's like, there's always this wise Indian, that's there to help. You know what I mean? It's this kind of trope that's there. But I think when Sturgill does it, it's not so much that it's like, just using it as a really kind of cliche here. I think it's that paying respect to these people, that they really were helpful, and that they really did try to make the land a better place. And they could tell how much he loved this woman, so they were willing to help. So they told him what happened. If you're looking for your woman, it is here that you shall find she. A man McClure had traded her for horses on which he used so he could flee. Dude said she wasn't his to trade. He stole her away and he shot me. Then the old man whispered softly, her you now must go and see. Just like that last bit of motivation. And it's almost like, is this a real person? Or is this like a vision that dude had? And I think, when you could think of it either way. I do think it was a real person in this narrative, but it's kind of like, it's almost like without it, does dude make it the rest of the way? And I think it's such an important little pivot point that he finds out the person's name that took her and also where to go and find her. So now it's like, okay, we've gone on this journey where he wasn't sure where she was. The trail had gone cold. It was like, were we ever going to find her? But now we have the location, we have the name, and now we see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and this fucking asshole, McClure, Seamus McClure, traded Juanita for horses to get farther away. So she wound up with this Cherokee tribe, and they reunite her. And at first I was like, okay, there's something really juicy here with the fact that when they found dude passed out, he has a tomahawk and he has scalps. And that can go one of two ways. Either they're going to go, oh, he kills people like us, fuck him, and we're definitely not going to help him get his wife back. Or what ends up happening in the song is they're like, well, we can realize that this was done in the Shawnee tradition. You must have Shawnee blood, which is set up at the beginning of the thing. Mm-hmm. So they're more willing to deal with him. And also, like, there was nothing explicitly that said, like, yeah, he takes scalps from Native Americans. It was just off of individuals who crossed him. So I think in that moment they realize he honors tradition. He has no beef with us. We found him. We nursed him back to health. We didn't have to fucking do that. And as Kismet would have it, they have the person that he's looking for. They have Juanita. And there's no more conflict. And you can say, like, well, it's kind of a cop-out that the people that found him just happen to have his wife. It's like, it's really not. He was following the trail, so he was going through exactly the same pattern that Juanita went through when Seamus McClure took her. So it doesn't stretch credulity that he would wind up finding her. I don't think it was easy. The idea that, like, well, it's pretty convenient, pretty easy that he just runs into her. It's like, nothing about this was easy. Did you listen to the other songs? Mm-hmm. He almost fucking died. His dog fucking died. His mule almost fucking died. So I don't see it as a contrivance. I think it's you just feel that happiness. Now you make both go in peace. And like your heart fucking swells at that point. This is such a great culmination to the main conflict, but there's still a little left in the tank as we move on. Just so gratifying.
Still a little meat on that bone. So the epilogue, before we get into Old Dude Part 2, I'm just going to read the epilogue because I think it's the best way to kind of move through this one and get to the real meat and potatoes of the real satisfying conclusion here.
Oh, yeah.
Now that Mama's safe and sound, home peaceful and secure, he set back out on Shamrock to find and kill McClure. It didn't take him very long to track old Seamus down. McClure wanted Juanita back and wanted to be found. And then we move into Old Dude Part 2. And this is where that rifle comes back into play. So he sees Seamus about 300 yards away. But Seamus didn't know that he was deadly as can be. Thought he was out of range of that rifle from Kentucky. And so Seamus is basically kind of like taunting him. You know, he's like, yeah, I'm here, but you can't hit me. And when you think about 300 yards away, Like, that's a long fucking way. Like, 3 football fields is a long fucking way to shoot a rifle. Especially, I'm guessing the rifles back then did not have the technology that we have now. And to think that he could make a shot from that far away is pretty incredible to think about. But it was set up in the first real song. He could shoot the balls off a bat. So it's like nothing. When I was talking about every piece fits together and there's nothing out of place, there's no extraneous things, nothing gets introduced in this album that doesn't end up mattering in some way, shape, or form. There is nothing extra about this. It is really incredible. Kind of just, it's, I've never experienced anything like this in a concept album. I don't think that it has this tight of a narrative where it's just kind of goes through and really makes you feel like you've gone on this journey with them. I think it's always been that you can appreciate the perspective in a good concept album, but it's hard to get yourself invested in it because there's a lot of times that it's like just crazy stories that don't make any sense to you. But it's like everybody can understand losing something that you love more than anything in the world and what you would do to get that back. And that concept, I think, is what carries through this entire album. And this is one of the most satisfying conclusions of any album I think I've ever heard.
Oh, it's so fucking good because he does. Once you realize how important Juanita is to Dude, and once you realize that Sam died to make this trip all worth it, and once he gets Juanita back and everything's kind of tied up there, now you want some good old-fashioned frontier justice. They make you fucking hate Seamus McClure. Sidebar, but I pictured Seamus the wrestler the entire time. That name is ruined for me. But it's perfect where this dumb fuck is just sitting there. He gets shot without even realizing it. And then there's this thrilling moment where Dude goes up ostensibly to scalp him and to, admire his handiwork. And Seamus isn't dead. He was playing possum, knife ready in his hand. But old Dude saw it coming, beat him to the draw. Moonlight bouncing off that tomahawk is the last thing old Seamus ever saw. And, like, I'm a violent man. I wanted to see Dude, like, graphically skullfuck this guy to death because I just hate Seamus McClure so much because of the way Sturgill Simpson built this whole up. Seamus doesn't get a song. It's just him being a nasty motherfucker that is the catalyst for this whole thing. You just want to see him get his just desserts. And it is so gratifying in that moment where Dude just buries the axe in his skull. And I know that's grisly, but that's frontier justice, baby. And what, are you going to let Seamus go free? He was never going to stop coming for Juanita.
No.
Were you stupid? You got to fucking kill the guy. And that's the kind of guy Dude was. He gets shit done. He takes care of his wife and his kids. He honors his friends, honors tradition. And that's why this is the legend of old Dude.
Yeah. And just in the tomahawk coming back into play. Got talked about it. The tomahawk in that rifle, the tomahawk in the flintlock, or the axe in the flintlock is all he ever needed. Both things is the last thing he needed to finish off Seamus McClure and to finish off this album. And then you were talking about, it feels like you're sitting around a campfire. They have an actual campfire sound to end this song. It's like, okay, now take a seat, relax, unpack what you just heard. And then they just kind of play you out with some really nice bluegrass balladry. And it really is an incredible journey all the way through. And I think we have to, it's only right if we give a shout out to the Hillbilly Avengers, the band that Sturgill assembled for this album that he had used for the Cut and Grass albums, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and who helped him realize this vision for this album. And I think that's such a cool name for them, the Hillbilly Avengers. Yeah. And it's such a Sturgill thing because he's a modern man with these kind of very traditional sensibilities when it comes to music. And I think as much as as proud as he is of the creative process that he's been able to accomplish so far in his career, he's just as proud of being from Kentucky, and that's nothing he's ever going to let go, and I think that's his strength, is knowing exactly who he is, but always willing to find out more about himself, and I think as we go through his career, and hopefully it's a long and fruitful one, we're going to hopefully get more albums on this level. You know, he has not missed yet. Every single one of his albums has been great. And, you know, and very rarely, I don't think there's any songs I can think of by him that I don't like. You know, there's songs by Coheed that I don't like, and they're my favorite band on the planet. There's tons of songs by Bruce Springsteen that I just don't like that much. I don't think there's one by Sturgill that I do not like.
No, I mean, there's me and Prince. Prince was prolific, but a lot of his stuff was dog shit. And I love Steely Dan, but I hate, like, Bodhisattva. That's a really popular song, and I fucking hate it. So, like, you're right. There are a lot of people that I don't want to say rank above Sturgill, but I think have been with me longer and mean a little more to me, although that is changing with albums like this. But there are people that I've kind of walked with for a long time that have made stuff I don't like. Sturgill Simpson could blow the fucking balls off a bat, baby. Like, I haven't seen him pull anything I haven't liked yet. So, you know, you talk about some of your favorites. I think Sturgill's one of them now, man. Like, he just gets better and better, and my appreciation for him just keeps growing. All of which is to say, absolutely stream this fucking album. 27 minutes of your life. You won't regret it. You'll go back for seconds.
Yeah, stream it. I don't know if I've ever given a stronger endorsement of an album than I'm giving right now. This is, to me, I mean, Sturgill has made some incredible music, and we've reviewed some incredible music on this podcast. We've been very lucky to live in the era that we do and have all of these classic albums and all of the really new classics that have been coming out by, like, Casey Musgraves and Olivia Rodrigo and Tyler Childers. You know, we've got a lot of really, really good artists these days, but with albums like this, I think Sturgill kind of stands head and shoulders above everybody nowadays. You know, maybe not at the level yet of a Willie Nelson or a Bruce Springsteen or somebody like that, like a luminary of music, or like the Rolling Stones or something like that. But like right now in this day and age of this generation, I don't know who's better than Sturgill Simpson. I don't think anybody is. Like, it just consistently great albums from him. And there's no skips on any of them. I could listen to all of them all the way through, and it just doesn't get old. He is just simply a genius. I don't think there's really any other way to put it.
I'm looking forward to the day, almost like a little bit of a Dude and Juanita situation for myself. I'm looking forward to the day where my kids are combing through my vinyl and they pull out a Sturgill Simpson album and they ask me what it is, so I can just smile and get that little, like, fatherly chuckle and just start them on that journey. Like, this is Sturgill Simpson is part of my journey from here on out. He was before in a tangential way, but he's become increasingly important to me.
Yeah. And I just look forward to everything that he does for the rest of his career. Sturgill, if you're listening, thank you for what you've done so far. Thank you for everything you're about to do. Just really, really nice to know that somebody in music these days is treating it with the respect that you are. So again, stream it from both of us. I think a hearty endorsement from Out on That Line for Sturgill Simpson in general, but especially this album. Go out and listen to it, and then listen to it again and again. Let us know what you think. On Monday, when you hear this, right afterward, just go right to YouTube and find our singles videos. There's going to be another one up there for you. You just search hashtag Out on That Line on YouTube. You could even listen to this episode on YouTube and then go immediately and watch that singles video. You have yourself a nice little twofer there, a little afternoon delight on Monday, if that's what you're into on a Monday afternoon. You can also find us on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find us on Instagram, @OutOnThatLine, on Twitter, @OutOnThatLine1. You could send us an email about how much you love this album, and I will be glad to read it. Just title it, I love the Sturgill album, and I love Sturgill Simpson, and I love Out on That Line. I know that subject line is getting a little long. I don't know if there's a limit. We can find out. You let us know. Alex, do you have anything else this week?
Get out there and blow the balls off a bat, baby.
Oh, yes, and we sure did. And until next time.